working. Hello, everybody. Welcome. It is time once again for the timeliest episode of Motion Design Hotline. I'm one of your chronometric hosts, Evan Abrams, traveling linearly through time with our other host, Kyle Hamrick. How are you doing, Kyle?
Pretty good. I'm traveling easily through time, I guess.
Yep, that's right.
There's no good way to do that.
Take it easy is what we say around here to each other. We put on our... I would love it if we had Hawaiian shirts that were a bunch of keyframes on it. Let's look into that.
You know, I've considered looking into that before. I think it's one of those things where it would cost a little more to make than I think there's a market for.
It'd be prohibitively expensive to create this very niche animator Hawaiian shirt.
I mean, if you took like 50 of them to an animation conference, you could probably do okay, but there'd be some front end costs there.
Well, we're going to pivot to being a lifestyle brand. But for today, what we are doing is we are actually answering a question someone had. They asked us how to make clock Mogrt. I'm paraphrasing because I threw out most of the
no, those are the exact words.
Yeah. How to make clock Mogrt. So we're going to be talking today about creating timers, countdowns, things like that. I've been on a kick of watching a lot of Taskmaster, so there's a lot of clocks on screen. There's a lot of timing. Anytime there is a kind of timed challenge on like a reality TV show thing, that's what we're getting into today. Trying to think. It was logistically difficult to put a timer on this show, but thankfully the interface you're watching it in already has that. So that's good.
Well, it's counting up.
Sure. Yeah. Just do the math in your head. T minus whatever. But yeah,
or
hello.
Do it with a stopwatch and then report in constantly.
Yeah, we'll find out how much lag this show really has.
Yeah.
So yeah, hello Keys. Hello to Wade, holding it down in the chat. Hello, Clever Devlin. Alejandro, hello. Oh, Brooke over there on YouTube. Hey. Wherever you are in the world, let us know where you're at, what you're doing. If you have any questions about the stuff you see us doing, it's going to be a bit of expression talk, but a lot of Mogrt design stuff going on. Is there any other housekeeping we should get to?
I mean, we should probably just give a general prompt. The whole point of this show, as we're kind of going to be getting into in a minute, is, you ask us questions about After Effects and related motion design things, and then we try to answer those in a helpful way. So if you have a question for us, get us over at motiondesignhotline.com, or there's a direct link to our form somewhere below me right now. And you can ask us your very own question, and then we will answer it eventually.
Yeah.
Maybe right away. We'll see.
Yeah. Sometimes we answer them immediately. So here are some examples about what we're driving towards. They're beautiful because I made them with my bare hands.
But you know what, Evan? They're beautiful because you're beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. That's, I always say that
I like how much you were taken aback by that.
Yeah, sorry, let me take my glasses off and shake my hair out. Okay, so this first example is a countdown clock, and all that it does is it will at a certain point it'll do a peck and start moving, and then when the timer runs out, it'll do a different animation, and all of this is automatic. So we've got here, when does the timer start? How long does the timer go for? What are the colors of the thing? Should it go forwards or backwards, right? So these are the types of, we'll say, design considerations. If we were going to pass this off to an editor, what would they like to do? So they might say, well, I know the timer has to be on here for 5 seconds before it even starts, so I want to be able to preload that on a clip. We're saving a bit of time by not forcing them to slice and extend that type of thing. And then timer duration, how long does this even go for? So we are picking how long is this hanging out on screen? How long is it actually ticking down? And when it hits the end, it's going to jump up and be wacky, and that needs to basically ride the time as this stuff kind of moves forward and backwards. So that's example number one. There's a bit of heady stuff going on in there to set that up. The other one is just a simple roller counter. So here we're going to go from 5 and we're going to count up to another number. So the controls in this one, what number do I start at? What number do I end at? But Kyle, how do we get from one number to the other? Well, we can squash.
That is the question.
Yeah, well, usually in a line.
You tell us.
Using the power of protected regions, people are able to just squish and extend this clip as they like. So no matter how many numbers, we're just going to get from one to the other. So it's a bit of a life hack to build this type of thing. But if we were passing this off to an editor and they knew, we basically need to count from 0 up to say 10, and it has to take a certain amount of time, then we've got it built in that they can really quickly lock that in. We've got this slow tick, 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 bing type of deal. High drama. So we'll talk about kind of affixing these things, how some things kind of need to be fixed, some will be variable. But to start it off, Kyle, you've got a bit of a primer on some of the objects that we need to access to make any of this happen.
But first, there's a very important question from our longtime chat buddy, Clever Devlin, that I'm going to paraphrase just a little bit. Why did the chicken timer cross the road?
I don't know.
Test out those improv skills, Evan. I don't have an answer to it. You come up with one.
Oh, you just wanted me to say what the chicken timer crossed the road. Oh, this is an invitation to create something. Okay. I'm going to say
yes, and
well, it knew exactly where it was going. That's why. So
okay, yeah. Doesn't have to be a joke. It can just be an answer.
Yeah, it had to cross the road for its car. I don't
okay. So I am going to focus a little bit more on some of the building blocks of getting to some of these things. Obviously, neither of Evan's countdown timers specifically dealt with text, like visible text. I mean, the numbers are, but I think what a lot of us are probably expecting is something kind of along this line, right? And there is a little bit involved in getting these kinds of things to happen as easily as you want them to. So I'm going to talk through some of those pieces and just give you, there will be some expressions happening in here, but also just some ways that you can approach this either easily or, leveraging some of those expressions. And I've got some kind of shape-based things too. I feel like in some ways I'm kind of laying some groundwork so that you can dive into Evan's examples that are obviously a little more visually complex. So a lot of us, have probably tried to put some numbers up on screen before and then make them either count up or count down. And there's a couple different ways to do that. Some of them are actually quite easy. So every text layer that you have in After Effects has a property called source text right here. And this is what actually controls what you see on screen. And of course, I could type numbers in here, but then I have to find a way to animate them. And that's not as directly easy in here. And you could certainly make a timer that you could say 0 and then you could keyframe your source text and then come up to 1 second and change it to 1 and then so on. But boy, that doesn't sound like fun, does it?
Right.
And there's much easier ways to do that. So let's go ahead and just get rid of that. And I'm going to add a slider control, which you can find under Effect, Expression Controls, Slider. And this just gives you a single number. It's, kind of the most straightforward expression control. I'm not even going to name it right now. I'm just living on the edge, folks.
This man's crazy.
I'm going to scrub this up to some random number here. I landed on 64 just so that you can see that it, has a value. Let's go ahead and close some of these things. Or just to give you a fun hotkey here, I can select the two things I want to see and hit SS, show selected, and now I only see those. Perfect. So I'm going to take my source text and I'm going to use this little pick whip here on this property and connect it to my slider. That's the same thing as alt-clicking the stopwatch to create an expression, and then you could link it right here as well. Same thing. And so I have that value of 64, and it displays that in the source text. Okay. I will quickly point out that you don't even need to do this little setup, because you can take, let's find something, rotation here, for example. You can literally take any property that has a numerical value, or, well, whatever, a value that can be displayed, I guess, let's say.
Yeah,
there are a couple of weird ones. Histograms and stuff aren't going to work for this, but you can take any value and just drag it up into your viewer, and then it will create a text layer for you that displays that property and value. And it's updated as you change it. So anytime you need to see a number of some kind like this, you can literally just drag it up here. You don't have to even create it manually. So FYI. So I have this number here, and you're like, okay, well, now I can keyframe that number. And so let's start this at, say, 84. And then over the next 3 seconds, we'll bring that down to 0. So we've just created a countdown, right? Well, totally. Except we have a little tiny problem here, and it's that it's displaying all of those fractional numbers. And that might be fine, but a lot of the times you don't want that, both because you probably only want to see the whole numbers maybe, and this is obviously visually like super chaotic here, right? So we need to rein this in a little bit so that we tell After Effects how much of this we actually want to see. There's a couple different ways you can approach that. So the one that most people might be aware of is you can, oops, I think I accidentally typed insert there. Let me just fix that. There we go. There are a couple expressions functions that do some math for you. And I'm going to type math with a capital M here. This is one of the exceptions to the what's called camel case, where expressions start lowercase and then go big. Math is different.
Wait, it's called what?
Camel case.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Now you do. Strange. Look, even you learned something today.
What?
So there's an expression called camel. C-A-M-E-L.
Camel case.
Yeah. Do you not believe me?
I'm looking it up. I'm looking at.
Okay.
I want to know why it's called this.
Well, because it's got like the humps.
Yeah, its name is literally named.
Because that's how camels write code.
Because when you look at a camel's body, you can tell that the hump contains a C in it.
Okay, so I am using a function called math.round. And then you put whatever you want to round inside the parentheses, okay? And so what this is going to do is round off the value that it's getting as soon as I click out of this box to a whole number. And so in this case, that's, all right, that's probably pretty handy. And for something like this, where we're doing a big change over a pretty short time, this is going to feel pretty good, okay? But math.round is actually not a great way to go when you're doing time if you're a little more accurate with it, because this is going to change over. Let me change these values here, and you can actually see what's going on here. So if I change this from 3, and then we animate to 0 here, let's watch what happens as we scrub through this, okay? So I'm on 3. Hang on. So it changes from 3 to 2 at frame 12. It's because it's rounding off these values. So it's changing in the middle of the seconds, right? You would actually want it to change like here at 1 and here at 2, and then it would land on 0 right here at 3. But that's not how this works. So we need a slightly different function here. And there's 2 different ways you can go, and it kind of depends on which direction you're going with your numbers, all right? There's a similar thing called math.floor, if I can type it correctly. And so that's going to round, but always round down. So in this case, this is kind of the reverse of what we want. So let me reverse my keyframes real quick so that you can see that. So this is going to stay on 0 until we get to 1 second, and then it's going to roll up to 1. Okay. So if we're counting upwards, math.floor is what you want, because you'd expect to like hit each of these numbers on when that time actually occurs, right? And then if you want the opposite, what's the opposite of the floor, Evan?
The roof.
Close enough. The ceiling. So there's another function here called math.ceiling. It's C-E-I-L. and it gives you that same functionality, but backwards. So if I'm counting down from 3 to 0, which I am on this slider here, it will stick on 3 until it gets exactly 1 second less, and then it's, you know, rolling down to 2, down to 1, down to 0. So if you just want to display something like this, and you kind of want it to land on those numbers in a specific way, this is how you can access that.
Right. We're taking we're taking the whole number, you know, above or below. What else we got? We've got like 2 fixed. We've got absolute. We've got mins, maxes. There's so many maths people could be enjoying.
There's a lot of ways to access this. So let me 2 fixed was something I was going to show. It's not quite as relevant on time, but you can type 2 fixed, and there's your lowercase and then capital letter, camel case. I'm going to put 2 fixed 2 at the end of this, and that is always going to show me 2 decimal places, okay? Now, in this case, I'm also rounding it off, so it's not really like super relevant here, but I could get rid of that ceiling, and then it would 2 fixed. So, well, I messed something else up there.
But importantly, 2 fixed is saying we have to have 2 places so that it's forcing zeros. So if you need it,
even if they're zeros,
yeah. So if you were doing like money, for example, right? This is the ideal formatting.
Yep. So once you start dealing with time, obviously, you know, it depends on whether we're talking full seconds or not. Let me just real briefly take us back to where we were a second ago here. So we've got 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay. Let's say that I just want a simple countdown timer for like 10 minutes or something in Premiere. You could literally just do this right here. And honestly, you don't even need this if you're, you know, careful about the way you keyframe this and such. You could take this composition and just drop it directly into Premiere unrendered on top of some other things, for example. But you can also literally just drag things in here, by the way. So, yep. And so now I have right here in Premiere that. And this composition is longer than those keyframes, so it's going to hold on 0. But I've used this exact technique to make literally like 30-minute countdowns before, where you could loop other things underneath, and then you just drop a countdown layer on top, and easy peasy, you export from here.
Yeah, so if you're doing like graphics that are before a live show, like they're getting projected up onto the stage, like these are, it lets the audience know to get in your seats and get hype for this thing that's about to happen.
Right, exactly. And it can actually be pretty easy to do like that. So when you're dealing with time, you know, as I said, a lot of folks are kind of expect to see something like this, where you've got hours, minutes, or seconds broken down with the colon and stuff. And the way text layers work, you can combine things, or you can kind of force specific formatting. So you can use a specific date and time format using expressions like this. And I can, these project files will be available later, so it's probably a little hard to read. Kind of my point in a minute is that you actually don't maybe need to write these most of the time anymore. So, but you can force specifically a date, time and date format like this with expressions. This one is also rigged to a slider control. And in this case, it's set on 120, which means 2 seconds, because this slider control is actually counting in seconds, okay? And so this is one thing about this, like if you as an editor want to be able to kind of set a certain amount of time, do you want to have to do this math to think in seconds? Often not. So you might need to start figuring out how to rip this apart a little more so that you can think about this the way that you actually would want to enter these values, right? And so then you might try something like this, which is, you can find this exact code from a little mini tutorial from our friends over at Ukramedia. And what's happening here is we've created a couple of variables. Again, we just have a slider control, which is in seconds in this case. And so we're taking our timer here, and then we're creating S, which is our seconds, which is the timer. our old friend modulo, who we've talked about on previous episodes. So this is giving us the remainder after we divide by 60. And then we have, for minutes, we have our friend math floor dividing that timer by 60. And then this plugs this into a text layer by combining some leading zeros if you need it, and then using another function called slice to like say, look, give me this thing, but only part of it, and then add a colon, and then give me the other thing with a zero in front, but then only part of it. And so you can kind of see this is getting like, it gets you exactly where you want. And again, we're having to count in zeros, but it's a little complicated. And one thing I want to point out that becomes really clear when you animate this is that monospacing is a big issue on these things. Look at how much this moves around. Every time you go by a 1, it just jumps all over the place, right? And that's not what most people want.
That's not how most clocks work.
That's not how most clocks work. So you can either use a monospace font, or thanks to, I don't know if you had any involvement with this one, Evan helped make a lot of the new presets that are currently available in beta, and I don't think they've quite launched in the real version yet. But there is a new group of presets here. Give me just a second for those to load. I want to show you the route to them. They're under animation presets, text, and then number counters. So these should be in the release version pretty soon, I assume. There's a counter countdown, there's a currency counter, percentage, and then a timer countdown. So this is the timer countdown. John Colombo on the After Effects team made this one. It's really smart. If you want to dive into the text animators here, it's quite clever, because apparently what he did is used zeros for all of these and used the character offset to actually display the numbers. So it holds the right width all the time.
Yeah, and one of the big like challenges is, one, monospace fonts don't always look particularly great. They're not on brand for a lot of things. And generally, like, if you want something that looks good, which is why we're in After Effects in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. So it is, a little funky that like it's kind of so complicated to get a number format the way you want. There is an effect that lets you do this pretty easily called time code, but it mostly works forward. Like, to get it to go backwards involves some hoops, and it doesn't look super great. It's from ye olden days. But I want to very much recommend these countdown presets, because they give you some really nice controls over here, and you can you can keyframe those values exactly like you want. Now, getting these keyframes into something that can be a Mogrt is another step, because you can't send those keyframes through. But I think I probably need to pitch this over to Evan, and we can kind of get to some of those concepts in a minute here.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's start with the more basic of the two examples. It's lovely to have text. What if you want to show the numbers in perhaps a more visually entertaining way? In this case, well, in this case, I've got some dials, right? It's like the numbers are on a cylinder, and the cylinder is going to spin around. So at its core, we're doing kind of the same thing, right? We are simply remapping one progressing value, and then that is going to be moved over and used somewhere else. And in this case, the important thing to remember is, if we've got 10 digits going around a circle, well, if you multiply that by the correct number, 36, it'll rotate the cylinder the number of times that you need it to go. And in this case, let me take you through the whole kind of setup from first to last. So here is what is sort of written on each of the rollies. And we've got, if we start from the beginning, please enjoy these numbers, 09876.
I love them. Thank you.
Aren't they great?
Those are great numbers, yeah.
It's most of them. And then I've used an adjustment layer over top to push us from 0 to whatever, and I've just offset that so that it's been slid so that the 0 is kind of closer to the middle. Now, the reason to do this is just so that when you're rotating it, it makes a little bit more sense. And if we come back here to the Cylindra-doodle-doo, which is the name of this excellent thing, we just apply a CC cylinder and then rotate this to be where it is, and we can use the rotation of the cylinder to actually rotate this thing around. Might look a little bit funky, but you get some nice distortion of things getting squeezed as they roll around the other side. And I'm sure you can imagine, how do we turn these values into something that a Mogrt is even going to understand, right? Because we can't put in keyframes, because we can't slide around keyframes. We have to turn things into a value. Very values-based stuff. So let's just think about it in terms of controls, right? We want to go from a number to another number. So we want to give access to a start number and an end number. And all we need it to do is to count from one to the other. So I've got this thing here called current number, which I didn't use the camel case on this, as they call it, the confoundingly named camel case. This is just this will simply display the current number that we want to see on the dial. What number shouldst be upon yonder dial? In here, let's just drag in some variables. Let's say we want to start ticking away at 2 seconds. We want to stop ticking away at 8 seconds. We want to go from this slider input. We want to go to that slider input. And the end result is simply ease, one of the interpolation family of products. So ease, linear, ease in, ease out. You can create your own custom ones of those, but those are kind of the big four. I've chosen to use ease just because it's a little bit nicer than linear. That gives you a real hard stop when you really clunk into the end. But all of them work the same way. You are going to have 5 arguments. Argument number 1, what value are we remapping? In this case, time. And then we're going to go from the start time, 2 seconds, to the stop time, 8 seconds. And we're going to run from num start to num stop. So we're going to be, as time changes from 2 to 8, we're going to go from, in this case, the values 5 to 42. And over time, that looks like this. You can see the little red number up here changing to be that. So we did it. We have a number changing. And if this was a text layer, we're already done, right? Because that numerical value is going to that thing. Big thumbs up. So if you want to use the text thing that Kyle just talked about, do that. But if you want to turn this into...
But if you want to do something cool...
if you want to be radical like Evan... we're going to come into our CC cylinder and we just have to turn that into a rotational value. So 10 numbers, 360 degrees, 7 countries, 12 continents, 1 race around the world.
Whoa.
I watch a lot of Amazing Race. So we've got coming in here the data, which is just the current number, question mark. You know, what is that? And then multiply that data number by 36, and then give us the remainder as we roll over 360 degrees, because we want to do this, because if we really crank this value, whatever the data is times 36, you can actually max out the value that After Effects will accept as a number. So that's why we want to get the remainder. We want to modulo this thing back around. When you hit 360 degrees, it's the same as 0. We start back. And you're probably wondering, Evan, what's that negative 18 all about? Well, that's just because of how the cylinder was set up. We have to offset by enough degrees that we line it up with the 0. So that is to get us back to the static number. And that's why you can see this is smoothly clicking away. Click, 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 click,
oh, so smooth.
Smooth. But that is the ones column. What's the tens column doing? How do we get there? Well, if we come into its cylinder, beep, 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 and we'll just pull this up. We are going to take that data and just divide it by 10. So because we're taking a tenth of that thing, then we end up here. However, I've gone ahead and put a math.floor on it, because otherwise, if this twas not hitting the floor, if we were not being floored, we end up with a very slow dial. And unfortunately, that's just not particularly readable, right? Like, am I on 3 or am I on 2? What's going on there? So the math.floor causes a hard click to go over on each of those, which can be a little bit jarring. But if you are really racking this super fast, it's very readable to actually see these numbers kind of populate. So something worth considering if you're making these types of dials. And then the final little life hack here is, we know that this will take place between the 2-second mark and the 8-second mark. But to an editor, that might not mean anything, right? If we give them that clip, they'd be like, that's not helpful, buddy, because the clicking up needs to take place over 3 seconds, or it needs to take place over whatever, right? So I've used protected regions, which you can set your work area and create protected region. As soon as you
just make them from a marker.
You could do a lot of things. There's like 20 different ways to make protect your region.
I mean, I think there's maybe 3.
3, yeah, probably maximum of 3. You could use the menus. You could be right-clicking on things. You'd be converting markers. However you protect your regions. This is as soon as you protect a region, though, the entire thing becomes stretchable. It turns into elastic, and so, because we have not protected the middle zone here, so we've protected the start and the end, the hard caps on
those are the handles of your accordion, and then the middle part is the squeezy bits.
You grab your concertina and you give it a squeeze, and this means that when we come back into Premiere, the editor just has to grab the ends of the clip, honk, and that will make whatever.
You have to make those sounds, though, or it doesn't work.
Exactly. Honk, honk. So this is a really useful way to now, we can go from any value to any value over any amount of time we want. I'm going to say that's a pretty useful counter for people. And I've used rotation in this case, but you might be using translation. You might be using any other type of thing. Just remember that we are basically mapping one property to another that just makes sense. So if these were horizontal dials that are like clicking over, click, 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 like if this were, say, footage of a Magic card tournament that we were putting scores on, or life counters.
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically. Or if you were, I don't know, I think it was a hypothetical thing someone might do. So just some thoughts about if you need to put graphics on screen, you think about what you need to graphically do. You try to turn those into values that you can then do. Umakor is asking, could you add more numbers? Yeah. So if you wanted, say, so this is the hundreds, tens, and ones column. If you wanted 1000s, just duplicate one of these, and let's go in here. We know that we want to divide this by 1000. And then if our end number is some incredible click, 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 click type of thing, you can really crank it out. However, you want to make sure that the range, the acceptable range of values that you can put in here is high enough. So just something like that. So if this was like a time machine or something, if you wanted to say the years when Mr. Peabody and that annoying
Sherman,
Sherman, who holds Mr. Peabody back, has that. So that's a great way to
maybe he keeps Mr. Peabody grounded.
Sure. Yeah. At least he's the temporal anchor so that Mr. Peabody doesn't slide into anti-time or something and create multiple fractured universes. Anyway, I'm not totally sure if you can change the past in the Peabody show. But anyway,
into that some other episode.
Yeah, that's Cylindra-doodle-doo. So if you want to make things that rotate around and display the numbo, that is how you make it happen. Out of that, let's go back to Kyle's screen.
Yeah, another quick question on yours that you can just answer. Does adding more numbers make it unwieldy? I mean, that's kind of a subjective thing, but
yeah, I mean, in my case, not really, right? Because the number of inputs has not changed. right? So from an editor standpoint, they're still only putting in a start and an end, and everything else is pretty much taken care of in between. So in this case, it scales pretty succinctly. And
it's all based on one pre-composition. So as long as you're not going crazy with the way you're coding it, it should be pretty light.
yeah, things will get spicy if you start to do like these ones are base 10 and these ones are base 6, for example, or base 60. So if we were doing hours and minutes, right, the minutes have to roll over at 60, but and we still need this one still has to go through the 10s, but this one is going to crank over at 6s, and but then we have to design dials that necessarily have 6 things and 10 things on them. So those are the difficult considerations when creating that form of object. But yeah, it's really just a matter of doing the math and flipping it over. And as long as you are computing from one column to the other, if you were to do this type of thing for time, you would really want to make sure that current number isn't a base 10 number, right? You would want to make sure that this is actually reading, minutes, tens of minutes, hours, tens of hours, and you're able to slice those out, those things. Just keep in mind, if you are indeed slicing stuff, you're turning it into a string, which is no longer a value. So you may have to go back to value. Anywho's.
Ultimately, this stuff does all kind of become a little mathy, but I think one good lesson to take away from that, and it leads well into what I'm about to talk about here, is that if you're making anything, well, I mean, if you're building anything that's a rig at all, but especially if you're making it into some kind of template for yourself or someone else, you really want to think about what is the thing that controls this movement, this change, right? What do I want to touch or want someone else to be able to touch as the thing that controls everything else? And it's often good to kind of literally just take a piece of paper and kind of map out the logic of this stuff before you start building things or writing code. Like as we're about to see with this clock, like I want the second hand to be the thing that people touch, and the other things follow that based on what the second hand does. That might be what makes sense, or maybe it's not. Maybe you want, the minute hand or the hour, or in this case, maybe it's these controls that are not yet rigged up, and that's what you want people to touch, but they drive the second hand, right? So a lot of template creation in whatever form is just thinking through the logic before you even get to coding things. So I think this is a very simple example, but I like it for helping people think through the logic of expressions and the way that you build things. So if you're building a simple clock rig here, right? I have an hour hand, a minute hand, and a second hand. And in this case, I've chosen the second hand to be the driver of everything. So the rigging on this is pretty straightforward, okay? I take the minute hand and I link it to that second hand using either this or, create an expression, use that little pick whip. It's the same, but you don't want that value. You want that value divided by 60, right? Because there's 60 seconds in every minute. So every time this second hand goes all the way around, one full rotation, the minute hand is going to move just a little bit, but obviously you don't want it to be 1-to-1. And then similar translation, you take the hour hand, you link it to the minute hand, and you want that divided by 12 because that's how time work. And so now we can animate the second hand and you get a fully functional clock. If you wanted this to literally just move forward at normal speed, you could add one more expression to the second hand, just put time, and then I'll start previewing this. And here we go, folks. Boy, that is thrilling, huh?
Riveting.
Yep.
This is a real good television.
It is. Okay, but let's say that you want something to function at correct time, but you want to be able to set the start time of it. Okay. How about then we quickly create a variable and we'll call this start time, and we'll link that to this slider control that I put right here. Ding, put a little semicolon, and then instead of just time, we'll say start time plus time. And so now this is going to move forward at normal speed plus whatever I set this number to. So let's set this fairly high. And so now here we are again, riveting television. As this moves forward at normal speed, but with an offset. So that's getting there. But what if we added a multiplier so that we could speed time up? Okay, so let's make a new variable called mult, and we'll link this to this other slider that we're going to have be our time multiplier. So we'll say start time plus time times our multiplier, okay? And so now, if I set this to 1, it'll move at normal speed. But if I set it to 100, it will move at 100 times normal speed. And so here is times moving at 100 times normal, but then working functionally. And this would be the kind of thing that would be very easily to send up a start time and a multiplier up into your essential graphics panel, send that out as a Mogrt. So this is going to keep running on its own, and then you could just say, what's your multiplier, what's your start time? Again, you'd want to adjust these ranges so that they actually can be adjusted to the amounts you want. And if you set this one so that you can tell the multiplier to be negative, now your clock runs backwards. So, oh, well, maybe it doesn't in this case. I probably need that multiplier to, maybe it's better to, because I made it so that this can't go negative. So let's just set the start range to -500 and then 500. There we go. And then we can fix this code down here. But maybe I'd made a silly oopsie. We'll just make this negative. So now it's -344, so you could do a countdown to 0 if you wanted to see the actual clock hands, for example.
And yeah, so Hicks Design pointing out there is a limit on like values. So
30,000 is your cap. Yeah.
So in this case, if you're hitting that, then what if you base the entire clock off of the hour hand as the driver, and then everything is a divisible, as a division?
Exactly.
Yeah. So the numbers, man, these numbers are getting super high. Oh, wait, the other thing could be the driver and to push it backwards. So,
and of course, there's another way to think about this where you could duplicate your start time, and you could say start time in seconds and start time in minutes and start time in hours. And I'm not going to take the time to do this code right now, but you would just have to kind of reverse this math leading into this driver of the second hand, or have each of these individually driven by this plus the movement of the second hand, okay? Using just the same kind of logic. The code would be slightly differently, but these are just little pieces that you can kind of plug in as you need to. And so you could then say, 22 minutes and, 4 hours and however many seconds, and then you could drive it that way. You could even tell it whether you want it to be positive or negative with a little, say, checkbox control. This is very modular, so you can just build it the way you want. Let me show you one other quick example. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for Evan's rooster clock. So I won't go too deep into this because I think even just those simple bits, like you got to just think about what you want to control here. Pretty popular here to just have, say, a circle. And then let's, this is just a shape layer with a stroke on it. I'm going to add a trim paths, and then we can use this, let's SS again, so we're just seeing that. And then you could use either the start or end value as your thing that gets animated, so that, this is a pretty common little countdown technique. I just wanted to point out something that some folks maybe don't know about. I think people are afraid to dive into the guts of shape layers a lot. Let's say I've already kind of started doing this, and my client's like, oh, well, obviously that needs to be the other way around. Well, you could just come back and animate the end value instead. That works fine here, but a lot of times you don't want to have to change your keyframes, or maybe there's other complicated stuff going on. Let me just set this part way. I do want to point out that you can always just come to your path, whether that is a parametric shape like this one or a hand-drawn path, and you have a little path direction switch right here. So you can just reverse the path right there without having to mess with anything else. And now that same value is going to work in reverse because you flipped the direction of the path, okay? Now to get this controllable for something like time, well, we have a 0 to 100 value here. And so if only there were some kind of expression function where we could map one sort of value to another sort of value, like linear that Evan showed you a second ago. So we could start, you can use time as a thing to drive expressions. I'm gonna go ahead and bring us to our completed version of this. My friend Zach Levitt likes to explain linear using driver and passenger as the values, which I think makes a lot of sense. So you have a driver, which in this case is time, and then you're going to set, minimum and maximum values for that thing, and that gets mapped to the passenger, or me. I kind of like to think of it in terms of like, I am this property right now, and so what do you want me to do? This is an easy one because it goes from 0 to 100. So, Evan, what would you like our starting time to be here?
Oh, 3 o'clock.
Okay, I'm just going to say 3, and then we'll say our maximum is 0. So in this case, we're mapping 3 to 0% and 0 to 100%. Okay, that's how this is going to work out. We can reverse that if we don't like it. Where something is broken in here. Not sure what. Line 7. I don't have 7 lines. Oh, I guess I do. I said drive min, and there we go. Driver. There we go. Okay, so in this case, now I'm getting 3 seconds. It's using time as the thing that drives it, but I'm kind of like doing a lot of that sort of multiplication math just behind the scenes here. So over 3 seconds, it's going to go from 0% to 100%, and then it's done. So again, these values could be very easily fed out, and you could replace this value right here with a slider control that goes to a Mogrt, and now you have a variable that is very easy to adjust, and it will always work based on that countdown right there.
Why, Kyle, let's do just that.
Oh, perfect.
So
what a segue.
Here is the 12-piece bucket de resistance here today. We've got some controls. What kind of controls? Let's say, for example, we needed a countdown clock. We want this to, I'm just going to set this to represent 100%, that contestants have to harvest a whole bunch of eggs while a rooster attempts to peck them. And
Hypothetically,
I never know when this would happen, but let's say that's happening. We want the timer to start, is going to animate to show that it's starting, and then it finishes thusly, right? Pretty good television. I would like to be able to say, when shall the timer start? 2 seconds, 5 seconds? How much lead time? How long are we going to stare at the contestants being afraid of the rooster? And then how long should the timer go? I've got it set to 5 seconds, but maybe it's going to be a 15-second type of thing. So, and then it's going to take 15 seconds. So the logic behind that, obviously, if we come down here to this stroke, which is what the actual we'll say in purpling of the circle is. This is just a circle with a stroke on it that is rolling around. And if we come into the Trimothy paths, exactly as Kyle showed, that we have the time, in this case, time minus S, and S here is the timer start in seconds. So, oh boy, it's 8. It's 8, but actually it's this, right? So we are taking away the start time. And then the timer duration, well, that's X. That's right here. That's from 0 to that duration. That's where we're going with all of this. So we will arrive at that time. And then R is the amount represented. Now, this is a bit of a wacky one. Because this is percentage based, you could say this entire circle represents the 15 seconds. Now, visually, maybe that makes sense, right? Or the editor might say, well, actually, I want it to already appear as if half of the time has already elapsed, or I want it to be a bit more visually apparent that this is filling up with something. So that's why I put this amount represented, so that we can literally make, well, the fullness of the pie is this. We have some variability in how we want to represent that. But hey, if the whole circle is the whole circle, then just leave it at 100, right? And that's the idea. It's the same linearization that Kyle mentioned. So there we go. We got the thing clicking and clucking away. How then? In my case, I've used a a thing on the scale to switch it back and forth if you want to go clockwise or anti-clockwise. Because now Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, is this ellipse path direction, is that even addressable through expressions?
No,
I don't think it's
not.
No. So I wanted to externalize this idea. So it's literally just flipping the layer over. So if it's on one, if it is checked, be normal. Otherwise, flip yourself across this axis, be different. So we can reverse the thing. And you can also just change the color. So let's say color A, let's just make that blue. Blop. So now the chicken is just filling up with that color, right? Or maybe you think, well, the contrast should go the other way. So we should go from this to this. So it is filling up like that. Having the ability to choose the outside, the inside, and the pie is going to give you the amount of variability that you want. And that's just straight Lincoln. That's just straight Lincoln, President of the United States. Different things. But here's a fun little life hack. How do we have the animations line up with where the time is at? This is the fun bit where after 5 seconds it pecks. Whoa, how is that? How is it doing this, right? How you cannot move a keyframe with your values, right? You can't.
I move them with my mind, but
that's right. I use my hands like Tony Stark building an Iron Man. I just hammer it until it's a super suit. But what we can do is we can use the powerful value at time and just say, well, let's look at that start time, value at time minus X, time minus whatever that start time is. And then this thing's value isn't whence it is happening. It's later. So the same keyframes are living on the property, but we're just looking in the past for when things should happen. And because this kind of animation starts at 0, 0, if we are subtracting 5 from our time, as soon as this hits 5, it's like we hit 0 for the first time, and then it plays the thing. So it's a bit of a cheat. Well, what if I wanted something to happen at the end? I want something to happen when this is all said and done. Well, we can figure out that time by going this plus this, 5 plus 15 equals 20, last I checked. And same idea. Within the transform of this, here are a bunch of things that are made to line up. It's really just position, scale, rotation, and that is going to take place at the 20-second mark, just like that. And value at time, do it at this different time instead of this time. And this can be really useful if you are creating Mogrts of any form. It doesn't have to be a timer, it could be anything. And you want to let an editor choose when something will transpire. This is a great way to do it. And if you download this file, and we encourage you to do so, motiondesignhotline.com, a real website for real people, I have deconstructed the rooster here into many, many parts. So if you want to make the rooster do all kinds of wacky stuff sort of during its animation, I invite you to play around and to find different timings for like the tail to rustle or for the beak to open and stuff like that, that you could say, well, when we're at the halfway point, this plus this divided by 2, what should happen then? So you can choose all these different timings, and then you have a totally dynamically timed Mogrt that will adjust depending on what someone does with it.
I think we need to value at time to end the show.
That's true. We've done a lot of valuable things today, but it's time to say goodbye. But that's the type of thing that you get here on the program. I hope this has been a useful amount of clocks and timers and countdown stuff, and you can start building your own these and start inflicting time-based challenges on people in whatever reality TV show you're interested in making. All the information is on the task. Let's see. What else is there to say? We're taking a bit of a potential summer break. Kyle's going on vacation, and I will be staring into a void. So we might not be with you next Monday. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Soon. Stay tuned.
Yeah. We might be catching Kyle from the road. We don't know yet. But You can always find more Motion Design Hotline. You can always find Evan and Kyle on the internet. So I'm at EC Abrams. You can find Kyle at Kylosaurus Rex. You can ask us questions, motiondesignhotline.com, an excellent form there where you can send us your cues. As you can see, this one really bloomed and blossomed into a lot of stuff. So no matter how big or how small, we answer them all. Send them to us. We want to see them. And yeah, I don't know. Anything else for the people, Kyle?
No, thanks everybody for watching. Chat was delightful as always today. I wish we could just read all the chat comments the whole time, but then we wouldn't be able to tell you all the stuff.
That's true. So that's the end of our stuff. Thanks for watching. Be kind to each other. Stay creative, and I will see you all around the internet. Bye for now.
Thanks, everybody.